Have you ever noticed how your body feels tired in a way sleep can't reach? Like there's a weight no one sees, but you've been carrying it for years, and the more you hide it, the heavier it becomes. You didn't fail. You simply reached the weight limit of what a human being can carry alone without breaking somewhere deep inside. There's a heaviness no one warns you about. A heaviness that doesn't come from effort or laziness or lack of motivation. It comes from holding what was never meant to be held by one person. And most people will never understand it. Because the backpack you're carrying is invisible. But you feel it every day you wake up already tired. Every night your voice goes quiet, but your mind stays loud. Every moment you wonder why simple things feel like climbing uphill through wet sand. Because that backpack is full of every memory you had to swallow whole just to get through the day. Full of the fears you hid because no one around you knew what to do with fear. Full of the times you said, "I'm fine," because the truth was too heavy for the people who claimed to love you. You didn't just store emotions, you stored responsibilities, expectations, unspoken rules, emotional labor, years of pretending you were okay while your nervous system screamed behind your ribs, and you kept packing it in, a little grief you never had space to feel, a bit of rage you never had permission to express, the moment you needed help and no one noticed. The 100 moments you didn't even bother asking because history already taught you the answer. Your backpack became the archive of everything you weren't allowed to process, and the world just kept walking, faster, louder, emptier, praising you for your strength because they could only see your posture, never the weight that shaped it. "You're so strong," they say. "You're always so calm." They don't realize calm was never calm. It was containment. It was control. It was survival wearing a smile. They don't see how many pieces of yourself you've stitched together in the dark just to move through the day without shattering in public. They don't see the cost of being the one who never collapses. They have no idea you're breaking your back trying to make it look effortless. Because strength isn't silence. Strength isn't stoicism. Strength isn't carrying everything alone until your body starts whispering what your mouth refuses to say. And carrying isn't coping. It's compensating. It's bracing. It's the child in you still trying to hold together a world that was never theirs to hold. There comes a moment. Maybe you've reached it. Maybe you're standing in it right now, when the straps of the backpack start to tear. When even breathing feels like lifting something heavy. When you can't tell the difference between fatigue and grief, between burnout and heartbreak, between "I'm tired" and "I can't keep doing this." When standing upright feels like an act of defiance, not endurance. And here's the part no one tells you. That moment, the one that feels like a collapse, isn't failure. It's the first honest thing your body has said in years. It's not the breakdown. It's the beginning of truth. The moment the weight becomes undeniable. The moment your body stops protecting you with numbness and overfunctioning and finally whispers, "I can't carry this anymore." And that whisper is the doorway to everything you've been needing. Alan Watts once said, "Suffering is the resistance to what already is." Most people hear that and think he meant pain, but he didn't. He meant the holding, the bracing, the tightening around the truth you were never allowed to feel. You weren't suffering because you were broken. You were suffering because you were pretending the weight wasn't there. You ignored the straps cutting into your shoulders. You dismissed the ache in your chest. You called your exhaustion just being tired, your anxiety just stress, your numbness just life. But your body knew. It always knew. It felt the invisible backpack growing heavier each year. It felt the tension in your jaw that never fully relaxed. It felt the breath you kept holding whenever someone walked into the room with the wrong kind of silence. Your body knew the truth before your mind dared to. It knew that you were one quiet moment away from collapsing into grief you didn't have language for. One minor disappointment away from unraveling everything you've been holding together. Because the thing about invisible burdens is painfully simple. No one rushes to take what they can't see. So you become the holder. Not because you're the strongest, but because you've always been the one who didn't drop it. And at first, the backpack is something you carry, but slowly, quietly, without warning, it becomes the way you move through the world. It shapes your posture, your tone, your patience, your sense of responsibility, your silence, your relationship with rest. Your whole nervous system reorganizes itself around the fear of letting anything slip. And the longer you carry it, the more familiar the weight becomes, until lightness itself starts to feel wrong, suspicious, unsafe. You've lived so long inside tension that relaxation feels like danger, softness feels like exposure, and peace feels like something that must be earned. Watts said, "We suffer not from the pain itself, but from the tightening we do around the pain. It's the grip, the bracing, the performance of being fine when your insides are shaking. It's the constant fear that if you loosen your hold for even a moment, everything will fall apart. So you keep holding, even when your arms ache, even when your breath is shallow, even when your soul whispers that it's too much. You keep holding because somewhere along the way, you were taught that strength means endurance, and endurance means silence, and silence means survival. But Watts also said, to hold your breath is to lose your breath. And that's exactly what you've been doing, isn't it? Holding your breath through joy, because joy felt temporary. Holding your breath through connection, because loss felt inevitable. Holding your breath through rest, because rest felt suspicious. Holding your breath through the moments that were supposed to feel safe but didn't, because for so long, the act of holding became the act of being. It became who you thought you were. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. But here's the question that changes everything. What if letting go isn't collapse? What if it's freedom? What if the moment you let the backpack slide even an inch off your shoulders, your nervous system doesn't fall apart, it finally exhales? What if the shaking isn't failure but release? What if the heaviness wasn't proof you were weak, but proof you were carrying far more than any one person was meant to? And what if the greatest act of strength isn't in what you continue to hold, but in learning how to put it down? Because Watts was right. You don't heal by gripping harder. You heal by unlearning the belief that you must carry everything alone. Imagine it. Not running, not bracing, not holding. Just setting the backpack down, not throwing it, not tearing into it, not proving anything. Just letting it slide off your shoulders and land on the floor for the first time in your life. At first it feels wrong, almost disorienting. Because when you've carried weight this long, Its absence feels like a kind of nakedness. You feel the ache in your shoulders that you never noticed because you were too busy enduring. You feel the muscles in your back flutter like they're trying to remember how to exist without tension. You feel your breath drop lower, not shallow and high in your chest, but deep, heavy, human. And then you feel the silence, not the painful, empty silence that used to terrify you, not the silence that meant someone was angry or something was about to explode. This silence is different. It is sacred, soft, borderline holy. Because healing doesn't begin when the pain disappears. It begins the moment you stop pretending that the pain didn't happen. That's when the backpack begins to empty itself. Not with force, not with violence, but with honesty, gently, quietly, in small, unexpected pieces. A breath, a tremble, a sigh your body hasn't released in 10 years. A moment of stillness that feels less like failing and more like returning. You don't need to dig through the backpack or dump it all out at once. You don't need to process everything or fix everything, because the moment you stop carrying it, your body begins to speak for you. A tightness in your throat finally allowed. A tear slipping out before you can talk yourself out of it. A wave of emotion, not analyzed, not shamed, just felt. This is the kind of release that breaks you open in the gentlest way possible. Not a dramatic collapse, not a life-altering meltdown, just small, honest unravelings in safe places where your body finally whispers, "It's okay now." The unloading doesn't happen in one heroic moment. It happens in the tiny ones, when you pause before saying, "I'm fine," when you stop apologizing for needing rest, when you put your hand on your own chest and realize your heartbeat is finally slowing down. It happens in the quiet nights where nothing dramatic occurs, and yet you feel different, looser, softer, lighter. Not because the world changed, but because something inside you finally stopped hiding. There is a tenderness in release that no amount of strength can imitate. Because this is where healing begins. Not in effort, not in resilience, not in holding, but in permission. Permission to stop, permission to feel, permission to rest without guilt, without apology, without earning it. Alan Watts said, "Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone." He didn't mean avoid your pain. He meant stop fighting it. You don't rip the backpack open to prove you're strong enough. You let it rest at your feet and allow its contents to rise on their own time. Ready to be seen, ready to be acknowledged, ready to be freed. And in that moment, you realize something profound. You're not falling apart. You're finally falling into yourself. Not the self that performed strength. Not the self that carried everything. Not the self shaped by endurance. But the self that was underneath all of it. Tired, trembling, and waiting for the day you would finally let go. You are not the weight. You are the one waking up beneath it. You are not the backpack. You are the soul that carried it because no one else knew how or bothered to ask. And now, for the first time in your life, you don't have to carry it alone. Not anymore. Alan Watts said, "You are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago." And he meant it literally. This part of healing is not about reinventing yourself or forcefully becoming better. It's about remembering the version of you who was never built to carry everything, the one who was meant to breathe, meant to rest, meant to move through life like water, not like stone. Before the backpack, before the performance, before survival became your personality, there was a self, quiet, gentle, whole, untouched by roles, unburdened by expectations. That self is not gone, it's buried, under years of pretending, under decades of bracing, under every moment you decided your needs could wait. And every time you soften, every time you unclench, every time you let the moment be enough, you brush dust off that original self. The you that laughed freely, the you that asked for help without apology, the you that didn't equate stillness with danger or rest with failure, the you that didn't need armor to feel safe. This return is not loud. It doesn't happen in breakthroughs or epiphanies. It happens quietly, subtly, like your body remembering something it learned before the world taught it fear. It happens the way morning light creeps into a room, gently, gradually, inevitably. Like the first bird you hear after a storm, like sunlight warming skin you forgot had been cold. You don't rebuild yourself from scratch. You peel back the layers you wore to survive. The overachiever who never allowed a second of rest, the peacekeeper who swallowed every truth, the rescuer who believed love meant overextending, the strong one who never got to fall apart. All brilliant survival strategies, but none of them were you. And now that you've put the backpack down, you don't have to perform any of them. You can begin to remember yourself, not by trying harder, but by noticing. Noticing the tiny moments of ease that don't ask to be earned. Noticing the pauses between your breaths that used to terrify you and now feel a little less threatening. Noticing how your voice changes when you're not bracing for impact. Watts said life is not a staircase to climb, it's a river to return to. And rivers don't strive. They move, they flow, they trust gravity more than force. So maybe healing isn't about fixing what's broken or proving you're strong enough to keep carrying. Maybe it's about stepping back into the stream you were never meant to leave and letting the current, gently, without pressure, carry you home. If something in you just softened, even a little, that isn't weakness. That's your nervous system realizing it's finally safe enough to put something down. If you're ready, write it below. I'm ready to put the backpack down. And then, come with me. This is the moment your life begins to feel like yours again. Not a performance, not a war, not a test of how much more you can endure, but a quiet, steady remembering of how it feels to move through the world without holding your breath. You're not broken, you're becoming whole. And this, right here, is the first step home.